Some nights the mind will not stop, no matter how tired you are. It keeps searching, keeps solving, keeps reaching for the next thing. But there is another place underneath all that effort, one that has never had to struggle, and tonight we make our way toward it. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. Together we will sit with the teachings of the Buddha and the old stories of Zen. They are not here to add to what you carry. They are here to help you put something down. The need to have every answer. The fear of letting any of it go. The need for everything to make sense before you can rest. When those are set aside, peace is not far behind. There is nothing to achieve here. Just relax, let your shoulders soften, and take a slow, deep breath. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. There is a strange thing about the mind at night. All day it carried you through your tasks. It solved problems. It remembered names and found the right words. And now, when the day is over and you ask nothing of it at all, it will not rest. It replays a conversation from years ago. It rehearses tomorrow. It worries about things that may never happen. You want quiet, and the mind offers noise. Most people believe something is wrong with them when this happens. They think their mind is broken in some way, or weaker than other minds, or too full. They try to force the thoughts to stop, and the forcing makes everything louder. The Buddha saw this differently. He did not say the mind was broken. He said the mind was already shining. In one of the oldest collections of his teachings, the Buddha says this: "Luminous is this mind, brightly shining, but it is colored by the attachments that visit it. Luminous is this mind, brightly shining." This single sentence appears across nearly every school of Buddhism. The traditions disagree about many things, but they agree about this. At the bottom of your mind, beneath every thought and every worry, there is something clear, something bright, something quiet. It was there before tonight's worries arrived, and it will be there after they leave. The Buddha chose his words with care. The attachments do not live in the mind. They visit it. The worries are visitors. The fears are visitors. The restlessness, the wanting, the endless planning, all of it comes and goes like weather. Clouds cross the sky. The sky does not become the clouds. Rain falls into a mountain lake and stirs the surface. The depth of the lake stays still. Your thoughts are real, and some of them are heavy, but they are passing through something that does not pass. The Buddha's teaching begins here. You are not the noise. You are what the noise moves through. Let us begin with a story about a statue. Long ago, in a kingdom in the east, there was a temple known for one thing. It held a statue of the Buddha made of solid gold. It stood taller than a man, and it had been shaped by craftsmen whose names were already forgotten. People traveled for weeks to stand in front of it. They said the gold seemed to hold light inside it, even at dusk. One spring, word reached the temple that an army was crossing the mountains. The monks knew the soldiers would take the gold. They could not move the statue. It was far too heavy, and they could not hide it. It was far too large. The oldest monk gathered the others in the courtyard. "We cannot hide the statue," he said. "So we will hide the gold." The younger monks looked at one another, unsure of his meaning. The old monk pointed to the riverbank, where the clay lay thick and grey. "We will cover it," he said. "Every inch of it. If the statue looks worthless, no one will take it." For 3 days and 3 nights, they mixed clay and plaster and covered the statue with it, layer after layer, until nothing golden could be seen. When they finished, the statue looked like any village statue. Plain, grey, ordinary. They pressed cracked patterns into the surface so it would seem old and worthless. The army came. The soldiers walked through the temple, found nothing of value, and moved on. But the times were hard, and the monks who knew the secret did not survive the years that followed. The ones who came after them were never told. Generations passed. Its fame faded. The clay statue stood in its hall, and monks bowed to it each morning out of habit, the way you greet something familiar without really seeing it. Some thought it was ugly. One young monk asked his teacher why such a famous temple kept such a plain statue. "It has always been here," the teacher said. "It is what we have." Then one summer, after weeks of heat, a long thin crack opened along the statue's shoulder. A young monk noticed it while sweeping. He came closer. Inside the crack, something caught the lamplight. He called for the abbot. The abbot held the lamp to the crack and went very still. "What is it?" the young monk asked. The abbot did not answer at first. Then he said quietly, "Bring the others." Through the night, with great care, they loosened the clay. Piece by piece it came away, and piece by piece the gold appeared beneath it. The shoulder first, then the folds of the robe, then the face, calm and shining, exactly as it had been all along. By morning, the monks stood in front of a golden Buddha that had been in their hall the entire time. It had never stopped being gold. Not for one day. The clay had hidden it, but the clay had never changed it. This is the Buddha's teaching about your own mind. The clay is real. The worry is real. The tension is real. The years of habit and fear are real. No one is pretending otherwise. The monks did not imagine the clay. It was thick, and it had been there a long time. But underneath, the gold was untouched. Decades of being covered did not dull it. Being forgotten did not diminish it. The moment a small crack let the light through, it shone the way it had always shone. Your awareness is like this. However long it has been covered, it has not been damaged. The mind that feels buried under worry tonight is the same luminous mind the Buddha described. Not a future mind you must build through years of effort. The one you have now, this moment, under the clay. This is why Buddhist practice is kind at its core. You are not constructing something. You are not fixing something. You are letting the covering loosen, a little at a time, and finding what was never lost. And here is the encouragement hidden in the story. The monks did not remove all the clay at once. It started with one crack, one glimpse. In your own life, a single calm breath is that crack. A single moment of simply being here, without wanting anything, is the lamplight catching the gold. Let us turn now to a story about an old woman at a crossroads. In an ancient land, where 2 roads met outside a market town, an old woman sat and begged. She had sat there for as long as anyone could remember. Every morning she walked from her hut, settled herself on an old wooden chest she had inherited long ago, and held out her bowl. Travelers passed. Some gave a coin. Most did not. She sat on that chest through summers and winters. It was just her seat. It had belonged to her family for generations, and it was heavy and scarred, and she had never thought much about it. One evening, a traveler stopped in front of her. He was on his way to the mountains, and he was in no hurry. Instead of dropping a coin and walking on, he stood and looked at her for a while. "How long have you been sitting here?" he asked. "Most of my life," she said. "And what are you sitting on?" The question surprised her. "An old chest. It was my grandmother's." "What is inside it?" She shrugged. "Nothing. It has always been locked. The key was lost before I was born. It is only my seat." The traveler crouched down and looked at the chest. The wood was strong. The lock was old and rusted. "You have spent your whole life asking strangers for coins," he said gently, "while sitting on a locked box you have never opened. Would you like to look inside?" She had no reason to say yes, but something in his voice made her curious for the first time in years. The traveler found a stone, and together they worked the rusted lock until it gave way. The old woman lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in rotting cloth, lay gold. Coins and small bars of it, the savings of generations, hidden by her family in some troubled time and then forgotten. She had been sitting on wealth her entire life, holding out her bowl for copper coins. She looked up at the traveler, and for a long time she could not speak. Finally she said, "It was here all along." "It was," he said. "What you spent your life searching for was already beneath you. It only waited to be opened." The Buddha taught for 45 years, and in many ways he was saying this one thing. What you are searching for is not somewhere else. It is already with you. We spend our days holding out the bowl. We ask the world for little coins of comfort. A pleasant meal, a kind word, a distraction, a small success. And there is nothing wrong with any of these. The old woman was not foolish for accepting coins, but she was sitting on something far greater, and she never thought to look, because the chest was familiar. It was just her seat. Your own awareness is just your seat. It is so familiar, so constantly present, that you have never thought to look at it. You have looked through it your entire life, at problems, at plans, at other people, at the past and the future. You have rarely looked at it, but it is the treasure. The simple fact that you are aware, right now, hearing these words, feeling the weight of your own body, is the gold under the clay. It is the chest beneath the beggar. In the Dhammapada, a beloved collection of the Buddha's sayings, the very first line is this: "Mind precedes all things." Mind is their chief, and they are mind-made. Everything in your life passes through this awareness. It has been with you through all of it, and it is the thing we look at least. Now, Buddhism sometimes describes this awareness with grand words: pristine, boundless, radiant. The old texts pile up beautiful adjectives, and after a while the whole thing can start to sound like something far away. Something reserved for saints in caves, with nothing to do with an ordinary person lying awake at night. But the luminous mind is not grand. It is simple. It is the most ordinary thing you have. It is noticing your breath move in and out without trying to change it. It is stepping outside on a clear night and seeing the stars, really seeing them, for 3 full seconds before the thinking starts again. It is the moment in early spring when you pass a bare branch and notice the first small leaves opening, bright green and new, and for an instant there is nothing in you but the seeing. That instant is the luminous mind. Nothing more mysterious than that. Moments like these visit every life, thousands of them over the years. Whenever a person is simply present, without wanting, without judging, without rehearsing, the clay parts for a moment and the gold shows through. Think of the last time it happened to you. Perhaps it was the warmth of a cup in your hands on a cold morning. Perhaps it was rain on a window, or the sound of wind moving through trees, or the face of someone you love, asleep and peaceful. For a few seconds, the mind stopped reaching. There was nowhere else to be. You did not call it luminous awareness. You probably did not call it anything. But that is what it was. The Zen tradition has a saying for this. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The life is the same. The seeing is what changes. The trouble is only that we miss it. We are busy. The mind is pulled to the past, to the future, to worries and projects and lists. The Buddha understood this perfectly. That is why he taught about the 5 visitors, the 5 hindrances, which we will come to know one by one in the modules ahead. They are the forces that pull us out of that simple seeing. They are the clay. But before we study the clay, it matters that you know about the gold. Because everything that follows rests on this. The practice is not a battle. You are not at war with your worried mind. You are uncovering something that wants to be uncovered. It is said that on the night of his awakening, the Buddha sat through the long hours of darkness, and that in the early morning he looked up and saw the morning star. And in that simple act of seeing, he woke up. Not in a vision, not in thunder, in the seeing of a single point of light in the dawn sky. That is how close it always was. We will return to that night in our next module, because it holds another secret. The Buddha was not alone under that tree. The visitors came for him too, all of them, all at once. And what he did when they came is a teaching anyone can carry for the rest of their life. For now, rest with this. Your mind is not broken. It has never been broken. It is luminous, brightly shining, and everything that troubles it tonight is a visitor passing through. If you like, you can feel this for yourself right now. There is nothing to achieve. Just notice that you are breathing. The breath comes in and goes out on its own. You do not have to manage it. Simply be the one who notices. Thoughts will come. Let them. They are guests walking through a hall. You are not the guests. You are the hall, still and open, with room for everything. That noticing, soft and simple, is the crack in the clay. It is enough. It has always been enough. Let us rest here for a moment. There is no hurry at all. Feel the stillness that is already in the room with you. And when you are ready, we will continue together. The luminous mind is always there. But you may be wondering something. If the mind is already bright, why do the difficult nights still come? Why does worry still arrive, and restlessness, and doubt? It is a fair question, and Buddhism gives an honest answer. The visitors came for the Buddha too. not only before his awakening, after it as well. For the rest of his life, what he did when they arrived is the heart of tonight's teaching. It is simple and it is powerful. To understand it, we go back to a night that has been told and retold for 25 centuries. More than 2,500 years ago, in the north of ancient India, a man sat down beneath a broad fig tree as the sun was setting. He had been searching for 6 years. He had studied with the great teachers of his time and practiced harder than any of them asked, and peace had not come. So that evening he made a decision. He would sit beneath this tree, and he would not get up until he understood. The evening settled around him. A river ran nearby, and its sound grew clearer as the light faded. Smoke from village fires drifted thin across the fields. Birds finished their calling and went still. He arranged a cushion of grass, crossed his legs, let his hands rest, and closed his eyes. The air cooled. The first stars came out above the branches. The texts say that night, everything unresolved in his heart rose up to meet him. They give it a name, Mara. In the old stories, Mara arrives with armies and storms, but the meaning underneath is plain. Mara is everything within us that pulls us away from being present. Our cravings, our fears, our anger, our doubt. That night, all of it came at once. First came desire, memories of comfort, of pleasure, of the palace life he had left behind, each one whispering that he could still return, that the soft life was waiting. He sat and let the whispers pass. Then came fear and anger, old wounds, old resentments, every reason to give up. The stories describe arrows flying toward him through the dark, and they say that as each arrow reached him, it turned into a flower and drifted to the ground. He sat, and the night held him. Last came doubt, the visitor with the softest voice. A voice asking the question that visits every human being. Who are you to do this? By what right do you sit here? And the Buddha did not argue with the voice. He simply reached down and touched the earth with one hand. The gesture meant something wordless. The earth is my witness. I am here. That was his whole answer. I am here. The voice fell silent. The long hours passed, and near dawn, he looked up and saw the morning star low in the brightening sky. In that simple seeing, he awoke. Not in thunder, in a single point of light and the stillness to receive it. Now, here is the part of the story that most people never hear. If you read on in the old scriptures, Mara does not disappear from the Buddha's life. He keeps returning. Year after year, for decades, the texts describe Mara visiting the awakened Buddha. Doubt arrives. Weariness arrives. Temptation arrives. This might sound discouraging at first. If even the Buddha was visited for the rest of his days, what hope is there for the rest of us? But look at what changed. The visits continued. The suffering did not. Because every time Mara appeared, the Buddha responded the same way. He did not fight. He did not run. He did not bargain or hide or pretend. He said one sentence, "Mara, I see you." That is all. In the early scriptures, this scene repeats again and again. Mara comes in some disguise, as discouragement, as fear, as a tempting thought. The Buddha recognizes him and names him. And every single time, Mara leaves. There is a strange and wonderful truth hidden in this. The forces that trouble the mind draw their power from going unseen. Worry grows in the dark. Fear swells when we turn away from it. But the moment something is clearly recognized, named for what it is, its grip begins to loosen. Not always all at once, but it loosens. This is what Buddhists call mindfulness. It is not emptying the mind. It is not forcing calm. It is recognition. Seeing what is actually here and saying within yourself, this is worry. This is restlessness. I see you. Our usual approach is very different. A worry arrives at midnight, and we do one of two things. We argue with it, building cases and counter cases until the whole mind is a courtroom. Or we flee from it, reaching for a distraction, turning over, willing ourselves to think of anything else. Both responses take the worry seriously as an opponent. Both keep us tangled with it for hours. Recognition takes a third road. You notice the worry, and instead of entering the argument, you step back one small step and simply see it. There is worry moving through the mind. You are not the worry. You are the one who sees it. And something shifts in that moment, because a thought that is seen clearly is no longer running the room. It has become a guest in the room, and you have become the host. You do not need a sword for your visitors. You need a lamp. There is a story told in the Tibetan tradition about a hermit who learned this for himself. He lived alone in a cave high in the mountains where he had gone to meditate in solitude. His days were simple. He rose before dawn, sat in stillness through the morning, gathered wood and wild greens in the afternoon, and sat again until the stars filled the opening of his cave. For months, the solitude was kind to him. His mind grew clearer. The mountain felt like a companion. But solitude has a second season, as any hermit will tell you. After the surface of the mind grows calm, the deeper waters begin to stir. Old fears he thought he had left in the valley began returning at the strangest hours. And one evening, the story says, they took shape. He returned from gathering firewood, and as he stepped inside, he stopped. His cave was not empty. Sitting around his small fire pit were strange, shadowy figures, dim shapes with glowing eyes, watching him. These were the spirits of the mountain, or so he believed. In truth, the tradition says, they were his own fears and worries, grown large enough in the solitude to take form. His first response was the one most of us would choose. He demanded they leave. "This is my cave," he said. "I came here for peace. Go." The figures did not move. If anything, there seemed to be more of them. So he tried his practices. He recited sacred texts at them. He explained, at length, that all appearances are empty and they had no power over him. He lectured them on philosophy until his voice was hoarse. The figures settled in more comfortably. Hours passed. The hermit sat down across the fire from them, tired of his own struggling. And in that tiredness, something in him softened. He looked at the strange shapes filling his home, and he began to laugh quietly at himself. He had been fighting all evening, and fighting had only fed them. "Very well," he said. "You are here, and I am here. It seems we will be living together. You are welcome to stay. Sit close to the fire. I will make tea." And as he spoke those words, with real welcome in his heart, most of the figures faded like mist thinning in the morning sun. Only one remained. The largest of them, the one whose eyes had troubled him most. The hermit looked at this last figure for a long while. He understood that this one was his deepest fear, the one underneath all the others. And he saw there was only one thing left to try. Not fighting, which had failed. Not even welcoming, which had carried him this far. Something more complete. He walked over and rested himself in the great figure's presence, as trusting as a child leaning against its mother, fully willing to be exactly where he was. And the figure dissolved. The cave stood empty and warm, the fire crackling, the tea water beginning to sing. The hermit discovered what the Buddha discovered beneath the tree. What we resist persists. What we recognize and allow releases. The steps of his evening are the steps of so many of our own struggles. First he fought. Then he reasoned and explained. Both made the visitors stronger. Only when he turned toward them with acceptance did they begin to lose their form. And the deepest one, the fear beneath the fears, dissolved only when he stopped keeping any distance from it at all. This can sound almost too simple. Why should welcoming work where fighting failed? The Master's answer that resistance is itself a form of attention. When you fight a fear, you are feeding it your energy. When you flee a fear, you are confirming to yourself that it is dangerous. Either way, the fear grows larger in your own eyes. But when you sit with it openly, neither feeding it nor fleeing it, it is finally seen at its true size. And its true size is almost always smaller than the shadow it cast. The Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught this same approach with a phrase of great tenderness. When a difficult feeling arises, he said, "Greet it like an old friend. Hello, my fear. I know you are there, and I will take care of you. Not hello, my enemy. Hello, my old friend. The feeling has visited you so many times, after all. You know each other well." This may be the opposite of everything we were taught. Most of us learn to handle difficult feelings by pushing them down or distracting ourselves. And it works for an evening. But push-down visitors do not leave. They wait outside the door and they knock louder. Recognition is a different road entirely. The worry arises, and instead of turning away, you turn toward it just enough to name it. Ah, worry is here. You are not agreeing with the worry. You are not obeying it. You are simply seeing it, the same way the Buddha saw Mara standing before him in yet another disguise. I see you. And seen. The visitor begins to lose its hold. There is one more comfort hidden in those old scenes between the Buddha and Mara. Over the years, the texts show something like familiarity growing between them. Mara arrives in a new disguise, and the Buddha knows him at once, almost before he has finished appearing. This is what happens with our own visitors too. The first 100 times worry comes, it fools us completely. We take its voice for our own. But slowly, with practice, we begin to know its footsteps in the hall. We recognize the particular tightness it brings, the familiar opening lines. And one day it arrives and we find ourselves thinking, "Ah, you again," with something close to warmth. That day, the visitor has lost most of its power and it never fully gets it back. Over his long years of teaching, the Buddha watched these visitors arrive in the minds of his students, and he noticed they tended to come in 5 forms. He named them so his students could recognize them quickly. The first is wanting, the mind reaching for something more, something else, something not here. It can be as small as craving a taste, or as large as an ache for a different life. The second is aversion, The mind pushing against what is here, hardening into irritation, resentment, or the simple wish that things were otherwise. The third is dullness, a heaviness or fog that settles over the mind, a drowsiness that arrives even when the body has rested. The fourth is restlessness, the mind unable to settle anywhere, hopping from worry to worry, replaying yesterday and rehearsing tomorrow. And the fifth is doubt, the voice that questions everything, including ourselves. The whisper that says we cannot do this, that nothing will help, that we may as well give up. He called these the five hindrances because they hinder the natural brightness of the mind, the gold beneath the clay. Not one of them is rare or shameful. They are as ordinary as weather, and every human being who has ever lived has hosted all five. Every one of them has visited you. Every one of them visited him. And in the teachings ahead, we will sit with each of these five, one at a time, and come to know them so well that when they arrive, you will recognize them at the door. Because that is the whole secret given to us on the night of the morning star. The visitors are not defeated. They are seen. You might carry one small thing from this teaching into your days. The next time a heavy mood arrives, you could try simply naming it. Silently, kindly, without any struggle. Restlessness. Worry. I see you. Nothing else is required. The naming itself is the lamp, and lamplight is enough. Let us be still here for a little while. Feel the breath move on its own, asking nothing of you. When it feels right, we will walk on together. So we come to the first of the five visitors. The Buddha named it first because it arrives most often, and because it is the hardest to catch in the act. Wanting. It shows up after a good meal, when the mind reaches for one more thing. It carries us out of the present moment into daydreams of other places and other lives. The body sits in one room, while the mind wanders through 10 others. It even follows us into rest. We lie down at the end of the day, and the mind keeps shopping. It browses tomorrow. It rearranges next year. None of this feels like a problem while it happens. It feels like thinking. But hours can pass this way, and the rest we lay down for never quite arrives. The Buddha placed wanting first among the hindrances for a reason. Anger announces itself with heat. Worry announces itself with tension. But wanting arrives as a sweetness, an enchantment, and we follow it gladly out the door of the present moment without ever realizing we have left. So tonight there is no scolding of desire. Buddhism does not ask you to be ashamed of wanting. It asks you to do something far more interesting, to understand it. The old word itself carries a clue. To want something is to lack it. A soup can be wanting in salt. A house can be wanting in light. And so it is in the heart. Every desire, underneath its sparkle, is a feeling that something is missing. The mind looks at this moment, decides it is incomplete, and goes searching for the missing piece. Sometimes the search is brief, a snack, a small purchase, an hour of distraction. Sometimes it shapes whole years of a life. And the searching itself is not the problem. We all need food and shelter, and warmth and friendship. The Buddha never taught that needs are wrong. The hindrance is something subtler. It is the trance of wanting. the way it promises that peace is one acquisition away, and then, when that thing is gained, moves the peace a little further down the road. There is always a next thing. The finish line walks ahead of us at exactly our own pace. One of the most common forms this takes is the chase for comfort. Watch the body on any ordinary evening. It shifts in the chair. It adjusts the pillow. It is a little too warm, then a little too cool. Nothing is wrong, exactly, but something could always be slightly better, and so we spend the evening in small negotiations with our own ease. Meditation teachers see this constantly. A student sits down to be still and spends the whole sitting rearranging, because the moment never feels quite comfortable enough to fully arrive in. The teachers offer a quiet discovery here. It is possible to be at ease even when things are not perfectly comfortable. There is a deeper rest that does not depend on every condition being just right. But we only find it when we stop adjusting for a moment and settle into things as they are, slight imperfections included. Those who must escape every small discomfort never get to meet that deeper ease. Those who can sit with a little of it find a steadiness that no cushion can provide. The Buddha put it directly in the Dhammapada. From craving springs grief, from craving springs fear. For one wholly free of craving, there is no grief, and from where would come fear? He was not condemning anyone. He was describing how the machinery works, the way a physician describes a fever. Craving carries grief inside it from the start, because it begins with the belief that this moment is not enough. A story is told in the East about a man who felt that lack his whole life, and where the chase finally led him. He was a stone cutter, and he lived at the foot of a mountain. Each morning he climbed to the rock face with his hammer and chisel, and each evening he came home with aching arms and stone dust in his hair. He knew the grain of every kind of rock on that mountain. He knew which seams would split clean and which would crumble. It was honest work, and he was good at it, but his heart was restless in it. While his hands worked the stone, his mind worked on other lives. One hot afternoon, he delivered cut stone to the house of a wealthy merchant. Through the doorway, he saw cool, shaded rooms, servants carrying trays of fruit, silk hanging in the windows. He stood there longer than he meant to, the cart rope still in his hand. And as he walked home through the dust and heat, a wish rose in him with surprising force. "If only I were that merchant," he said aloud, "then I would be happy." The story says the mountain spirit heard him, and when he woke the next morning, he was the merchant. The shaded rooms were his, the silk, the fruit, all of it. For a season he was delighted. Then one day a royal official passed through the town, carried in a chair by bearers, with soldiers walking before and behind, and everyone bowing low, including the merchant. And the old feeling stirred. "This wealth is nothing," he thought. "That official is greater than I am. If only I were him, then I would be happy." And he became the official. He was carried through the streets in the shaded chair. People bowed, but the summer sun beat down on his procession, and he sat sweating in his heavy robes, and he looked up at the sun, untouched and supreme above everything, and thought, "The sun is greater than any official. If only I were the sun." He became the sun. He poured light across the fields and felt magnificent, until a cloud drifted beneath him and blocked his light from the earth as easily as a hand covers a lamp. The cloud is greater than the sun, he thought, astonished. And he became the cloud, vast and dark with rain. But the wind came and pushed him wherever it wished. So he became the wind and roared across the land, bending trees, lifting roofs, until he struck something that did not bend and did not move, no matter how he howled against it. The mountain. So he became the mountain, and at last he felt it. Utter solidity. Nothing above him, nothing that could move him. He had reached the top of all wanting. He rested in his own immensity and thought, now, finally, there is nothing greater than I am. And then, from somewhere far below, he felt a small, sharp, steady tapping. Something was chipping away at his base, piece by piece. Something, impossibly, was stronger than the mountain. He looked down, and there at his foot stood a stone cutter, hammer in hand, working in the morning light. The story ends not with a punishment, but with a circle. The chase passed through wealth, power, sun, cloud, wind, and stone, and arrived back at a man with a hammer at the foot of a mountain. The very life the stonecutter had wished away was, in the end, the position of greatest strength. Nothing he became was ever enough, because the feeling of lack traveled with him. It was never in his circumstances. It was in the wanting itself. Each new form felt complete for a season, and then the old whisper returned. This is the trance, and it does not only chase wealth and power. It can chase anything. It is said that long ago, a monk on a long retreat found his meditation completely taken over, day after day, by a plan for a great water wheel he might build for his village. How the wheel would turn, how the channels would run, how the millstones would be set. He was not a builder and never would be, but the planning was delicious and he could not stop. When at last he brought this to his teacher, expecting to be told about water wheels, the teacher said only, "The wheel is not the hook. The sweetness of the dreaming is the hook. Look at the sweetness and ask what it is feeding." That question opens everything. Because beneath the sweetness of any daydream, there is usually a small, empty place the dream is trying to fill. A touch of boredom, a loneliness, a sense of not quite enough. The dream covers it the way a song covers silence. And the Buddhist insight is this: if you turn and meet that empty place directly, without running from it, it is far smaller and softer than you feared. Met with kindness, it often simply closes, like water settling after a stone. This is why the masters say that wanting, fully understood, becomes a teacher. Each strong desire is a messenger pointing back toward the place in us that feels unfilled. Most people spend their lives obeying the messenger and never reading the message. The few who pause and look at where the wanting comes from find something unexpected. The lack was never as deep as the chasing suggested. Often it asks for nothing more than to be noticed. There is one more story to share about a king who had everything and could not rest. His granaries were full, his borders were peaceful, and his palace held more treasures than he could count. Yet every night he lay awake, his mind circling and reaching, never satisfied, and he could not understand why. He summoned a wise hermit from the forest and asked him plainly, "I have everything a man can possess. Why is there no peace in me?" The hermit considered him for a while. Then he said, "There is a cure. You must find a truly contented man and wear his shirt for one night. Then peace will be yours." The king's ministers rode out the next day to search the kingdom. They went first to the wealthy households, naturally. In the grandest of them, they found a merchant who owned ships on 3 rivers. "Are you content?" they asked him. He laughed without joy. "Content? My rival has 4 rivers." They went to a famous singer whose name was known in every province. "Are you content?" "I will be," she said, "when I am certain no younger voice will replace me." They went to a general covered in honors. "Are you content?" He glanced at the door before he answered. "A man in my position," he said softly, "is never finished guarding what he has won." Months passed this way. The ministers learned that in the entire kingdom, contentment was the rarest treasure of all, and the people who owned the most of everything else seemed to have the least of it. Then one evening, riding home discouraged through the countryside, a minister heard a man singing. The voice came from a small field by the river, where a farmer sat resting against a tree in the last light, singing to no one at all, simply because the evening was warm and the work was done. The minister approached him. "Tell me, friend, are you content?" The farmer thought about it honestly. "I have eaten today. I will sleep under a roof tonight. The river is near and my field is growing. Yes, I lack nothing." The minister nearly wept with relief. "Then, in the name of the king, I must ask for your shirt." The farmer began to laugh, warmly and without a trace of mockery. He spread his arms. He was wearing a simple cloth wrap and nothing more. "Sir," he said, "I do not own a shirt." The contented man had no shirt to give. The king who owned everything could not buy what the farmer had while owning almost nothing. Possessions were never the measure. The farmer's wealth was a mind that had stopped reaching, and that is not for sale anywhere. The Thai forest master Ajahn Chah said it in a single breath. "If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace." And letting go is not losing. That is the great misunderstanding. The farmer lost nothing by lacking a shirt. Letting go means setting down the reaching, even for a moment, and discovering what is already in your hands. An evening, a breath, a warm room. Enough. This is also why the deepest joys are so hard to chase. The pleasures we hunt are feelings, and feelings rise and fade like weather. But contentment is not a feeling that arrives. It is what remains when the reaching rests. It was underneath the whole time, the way still water lies beneath waves. In the days ahead, you might notice the visitor of wanting when it comes. Not to refuse it, just to see it. A small recognition in the spirit of the Buddha greeting Mara. "Ah, wanting is here, telling me something is missing." And then, perhaps, one honest look around at what is already present. Most moments, examined kindly, are not lacking very much at all. We will rest here for a few breaths. Nothing is missing from this moment, and nothing needs to be reached for. Whenever you are ready, the path continues. Wanting pulls the mind toward what is not here. The second visitor does the opposite. It pushes against what is. The Buddha called it aversion. It is the mind hardening, the flash of irritation at a sound in the night, the resistance to an ache, a chore, a memory, the resentment that returns each time a certain name is mentioned. Where wanting whispers, that this moment lacks something. Aversion declares that this moment contains something wrong and braces against it. It visits in small ways constantly. A door slams somewhere in the building just as you settle. A sentence someone said this afternoon replays itself, and the body tightens as if hearing it fresh. The pillow is wrong, the room is wrong, the hour is wrong. None of these are large troubles, but the bracing against them is tiring in a particular, draining way, because bracing is work, and a mind that resists all evening has in effect labored all evening. Unlike wanting, this visitor does not arrive as sweetness. It arrives as heat and tightness. The jaw sets, the shoulders rise, the chest closes a little, and because it feels unpleasant, we usually respond in the worst possible way. We become irritated at our own irritation. We resent our own resentment. The visitor knocks, and we answer the door with more of the same. Buddhism offers another door entirely. Watch the mind through a single ordinary day, and a pattern appears. Like, dislike. Like, dislike. The weather is judged before breakfast. A voice on the phone is pleasing or grating. The traffic, the news, the temperature of the tea. All day long, a small clock in the mind stamps every experience. Approved. Rejected. Approved. Rejected. Most of this passes harmlessly, but when the dislike grows strong and we hold it, it becomes aversion, and aversion has a particular effect. It divides. It draws a hard line between us and whatever we are resisting, and then between us and whoever we are resisting. A mind full of aversion is a kingdom at war on several borders at once, and a kingdom at war cannot rest. There is a second cost, quieter than the first. When our peace depends entirely on the clock stamps, we become servants of our own preferences. The day is good only if the weather cooperates, the people behave, the plans hold. Since no day fully cooperates, no day is fully good. The teachers of the Insight tradition describe students discovering this with real astonishment in their first weeks of practice. They sit down, watch the mind, and find the stamping running constantly, hour after hour, approving and rejecting things that have not even happened yet. The Dhammapada speaks to this in one of its earliest verses. Hatred never ends by hatred. By kindness alone it ends. This is an ancient law. The verse is usually read as advice about conflict between people, and it is. But it applies just as truly inside a single heart. Meeting your own anger with anger does not end it. There is a story from a mountain monastery about how this plays out. The monks there gathered each evening to sit together in the meditation hall. Among them was a monk who took his practice seriously. He arrived early, arranged his cushion with care, and settled himself with real devotion. One evening, just as the hall fell silent, another monk came in late. His footsteps were loud on the wooden floor. He placed his cushion directly in front of the devoted monk, sat down with a sigh, and began to breathe in a manner that could be heard across the room. The devoted monk opened one eye. He closed it. He returned to his breath. But the breathing in front of him continued, slow and audible, in and out. And his mind began to speak. How can a person breathe so loudly? Has no one taught him? And why sit there, of all places, when the hall is half empty? The bell of the first hour rang, and he had not noticed a single breath of his own. He resolved to begin again, but now he noticed the late monk's robe, which was wrinkled. A monk who cannot keep his robe in order, his mind observed, is a monk who is careless in everything. And look how he sways, and his sandals left crooked by the door. By the second bell, the devoted monk had reviewed the late monk's posture, his habits, his upbringing, and his character, and found every one of them lacking. After the second bell, he tried force. He clenched his attention onto his breath and held it there, determined not to lose another hour. For a few minutes it worked. Then a small sigh came from the cushion in front of him, and the whole structure collapsed, and the inner courtroom resumed its session with fresh evidence. By the time the final bell rang, his shoulders ached from a battle no one else in the hall knew was being fought. When the hall emptied, the devoted monk went to the old teacher, still burning. "Forgive me," he said, "but my entire evening of practice was ruined." The monk who came late sat directly before me, breathing like a bellows. I could not meditate at all. The teacher considered this. Where was he sitting? Directly in front of me. "And where were you sitting?" The monk blinked. "On my cushion." "Behind him." "Are you certain?" The teacher asked. "Because it sounds to me as though you spent the whole evening sitting inside his robe, inside his sandals, inside his lungs. He sat in front of you for 2 hours. You lived inside him for 2 hours. Of the two of you, who had the more peaceful evening?" The monk opened his mouth and closed it again. "He took nothing from you," the teacher said. "You handed him your evening, one thought at a time. Tomorrow, see if you can keep it." The late monk was, at worst, a minor disturbance. A sound in the room, no different from rain on the roof. Everything beyond that, the 2 hours of burning, was built and paid for by the devoted monk himself. This is how it always works. Resentment is held anger, and holding is labor. There is an old Buddhist image for it. Anger is an ember from the fire, snatched up to throw at someone. Whether or not the throw ever happens, one fact is settled from the first instant. The hand holding the ember burns. Setting it down is not a favor to the other person. It is mercy toward your own hand. Some embers are held for an evening. Some are held for years. A remark made long ago, an unfairness never corrected, a door closed in our face once, and every time the memory returns, we pick the ember up again and feel the old heat as if it were new. The person who wronged us may have forgotten the whole affair. They may be at peace, eating their dinner, sleeping their sleep, while we tend the coal they left behind. This is the arithmetic the Buddha wanted his students to see clearly. Held anger costs the holder, every time, and pays the holder nothing. And here is the kindness hidden inside this visitor. Aversion, unlike wanting, hurts right away. The tightness, the heat, the constriction, all of it is felt at once, which means it is easy to recognize. The moment the chest hardens, the visitor has announced itself. Aversion is here. I see you. The same lamp the Buddha raised to Mara works on every ember we carry. There is a tale from old Japan about a man who carried such an ember for years and believed it was part of him. He was a farmer with a fierce temper. It rose in him suddenly, over small things, a broken tool, a stubborn ox, a careless word, and afterward, he was always ashamed. He had carried it since he was young, and he had come to believe it was simply his nature, woven into him at birth. One spring he heard that a Zen master was staying at a temple beyond the next village, and he walked there and asked to see him. "Master," he said, "I was born with a terrible temper. It flares up before I can stop it. How can I cure it?" The master looked at him with interest. "You were born with it? How remarkable. Show it to me." The farmer was confused. "I cannot show it to you now. It comes without warning." "I see. Then bring it to me when it comes." "I cannot do that either," said the farmer. "It would be gone by the time I arrived. It rises and passes before I know it." The master nodded slowly. "Then consider what you have just told me. This temper of yours appears without warning and vanishes on its own. You cannot produce it. You cannot hold on to it. You cannot bring it anywhere. If it were truly your nature, it would be with you at all times, the way your hands are with you. Whatever comes and goes is not what you are. You were not born with it. It visits you." The farmer stood in silence. All his life, he had said, "I am an angry man." The words had felt as solid as his own bones. And in one conversation, the sentence had quietly changed. "Anger visits me." He bowed and walked home. The road went down through pine forest and out along the rice fields, and he walked it slowly, turning the master's words over like a smooth stone in his hand. Somewhere along that road, without ceremony, he set down a burden he had carried since boyhood, the belief that he was made wrong. The temper still came, now and then, for the rest of his years, but it never again found him believing it was his face in the mirror. He would feel the old heat rise and think, "Ah, my visitor." And the heat, no longer fed by belief, passed through him faster each time, until his neighbors knew him as a calm man, and only he remembered it had ever been otherwise. Whatever comes and goes is not what you are. That single line holds the whole teaching of this visitor. The anger is real when it arises, just as a storm is real. But storms pass, and the sky they crossed remains, unburnt. Every irritation that has ever risen in a mind has also ended. The one who watched them come and go has not. The Buddha lived this teaching in his encounters with others. The old texts tell of a man who came to him and spoke harshly, insult after insult, while the Buddha listened in silence. When the man finished, the Buddha asked him one question. "If you offer someone a gift, and they decline to accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man answered, "It would still belong to me." "Just so," said the Buddha. "I do not accept your harsh words. They remain with you." And he felt no anger toward the man at all, only a kind of patience, because he understood that harsh words come from a suffering heart, and a suffering heart deserves compassion more than combat. Declining the gift is always available to us, not by pretending the words were never spoken, but by choosing not to carry them home and unwrap them again every evening for years. None of this asks you to become a person without preferences. You will always enjoy some foods and not others, some weather, some company. Preferences are part of being alive. The freedom Buddhism points to is subtler. It is the ability to be at peace even when your preferences are not being met. To sit beside the sound you did not choose, the delay you did not choose, the ache you did not choose, without handing them your whole evening. Picture two travelers caught in the same rain, waiting under the same roof for the same delayed cart. One spends the hour rehearsing complaints, reviewing whose fault this is, feeling the lost time like a wound. The other watches the rain come down on the road, feels the cool air, lets the hour be an hour. The rain is identical. The delay is identical. The only difference between their afternoons is what each one added to it. The first traveler suffered the rain plus his war against the rain. The second suffered only the rain, which, once accepted, turned out to be hardly suffering at all. People who find this freedom describe the same discovery. The unpleasant thing remains unpleasant, but the war around it ends. And it turns out the war was most of the suffering. So when the heat rises in the days to come, there is one small thing you might try. Feel where the aversion lives in the body. The jaw, perhaps, or the chest, or the hands. And without arguing with the feeling, let just that one place soften. The visitor is here. You have seen it. The ember can rest in the ashes where it belongs. Let the body grow heavy and loose for a moment. There is nothing here to resist and no one to oppose. When it feels natural, we will go on together. The Buddha taught that 5 forces visit the mind and cloud its natural brightness. He called them the 5 hindrances, and we have met 2 of them so far. Wanting, which sparkles and reaches for what is not here. Aversion, which burns and pushes against what is. Both arrive with energy. The third visitor is different. It comes without sound, without heat, without any announcement at all. It comes as fog. The Buddha called it sloth and torpor. A heaviness settles over the mind. The eyelids grow thick. Thoughts lose their edges. You sit down to read, or to reflect, or simply to be present with your own life, and within minutes, a drowsy dimness rolls in from somewhere, and the brightness of the mind goes grey. It has other disguises too. The afternoon hour when the whole world seems wrapped in wool. The book opened with good intentions and closed 3 pages later. The conversation we drift out of without meaning to. The fog does not argue and does not burn. It simply settles, soft and grey and patient, over whatever we were trying to do. Of all the 5 visitors, this is the one people judge themselves for most harshly. We call it laziness. We call it weakness. We take the fog personally, as evidence of some flaw. And so this teaching begins where Buddhism always begins with this visitor. There is no shame in fog. The teachers of the Buddhist path observed something useful about dullness. It rises from 2 different springs, and they ask for 2 different responses. The first spring is the body. Sometimes a tired mind is only a tired mind. After a day of working, carrying, giving, and solving, the body asks for rest in the only language it has. There is no hidden meaning in this kind of fog. The wisdom it calls for is the simplest wisdom there is. Rest is not a failure of practice. Rest is practice. Even the Buddha slept. The second spring is subtler, and the meditation traditions have known about it for many centuries. Sometimes the fog rolls in not because the body is tired, but because the mind is approaching something it does not feel ready to meet. An old sorrow, a truth about our life we have been postponing, a feeling that was put away long ago. As awareness draws near to it, a drowsiness arrives, soft and sudden, like a curtain lowered by a careful hand. Teachers who sit with students one-on-one see this often enough to expect it. A conversation moves towards something important, something the student has circled for weeks, and just as it comes near, the student yawns. The eyes grow heavy. The student apologizes and says they must not have slept well. Sometimes that is true. But sometimes the timing tells another story. The sleepiness arrived exactly when it was needed, the way fog gathers in a valley at dusk. A teacher in the Zen tradition gave his students a piece of advice about this. If you are reading a book of the teachings, he said, and you find yourself falling asleep at a certain page, mark that page. That is the page meant for you. This second kind of fog is not an enemy either. It is the mind protecting itself, a kind of tenderness, the same instinct that makes us look away from a too bright light. It only asks to be understood. There is a story about a young scribe who came to understand it. He lived in a monastery high in the mountains, where his work was copying the old texts. He had a fine, careful hand, and he loved the work. Each morning, he ground his ink, opened the manuscript assigned to him, and copied line after line in the cold, clear light of the writing hall. But there was one difficulty, and it puzzled him. Every day, somewhere in the middle of the morning, a heavy drowsiness would overcome him. His brush would slow, his head would nod. He would catch himself, sit up straight, splash water on his face, and continue, only to find the same heaviness returning the next day at the same hour. He tried everything he knew. He went to bed earlier. He rose and walked the corridor between lines. He stood at his desk instead of sitting. He ate less at breakfast, then more at breakfast. The fog outlasted every remedy. Whatever he did, the same hour of the morning found him nodding over the same desk, and he began to wonder, with some sadness, whether he was simply unfit for the work he loved. The old monk who oversaw the writing hall watched this for some weeks. One morning he came and stood beside the young scribe's desk and looked at the page he was copying. "Tell me," the old monk said, "is it always this text?" The scribe considered. "I had not thought about it. But yes, it is this one. And always near this passage?" The scribe looked down at the lines before him. It was a passage about home, about leaving the household life, about the road that goes out from the village gate and does not turn back. He was silent for a while. "Yes," he said at last, "always near this passage." The old monk pulled over a stool and sat down beside him. "When you copy these lines, where does your mind go?" And the young scribe, to his own surprise, found his eyes growing warm. He spoke of his village, far in the lowlands, of his mother at the gate on the morning he left, and how she had smiled for his sake and held the smile until he was past the bend in the road, of how he had folded that morning away and not looked at it since, because he believed a monk should not look at such things. The old monk listened to all of it without hurry. When the scribe finished, the silence in the writing hall felt different, lighter. The drowsiness was never about the hour of the morning, the old monk said. It was standing guard over this. You may find the work easier now. And it was so. The scribe copied the passage that very day with clear eyes. The longing for home still lived in him, but it no longer needed to hide behind a curtain of sleep, because it had been seen and spoken and met with kindness. From then on, whenever heaviness visited his work, he had a new habit. He would pause and ask softly, "What are you guarding?" Sometimes the answer was nothing at all, only a short night's sleep. But sometimes a door opened, and behind it was a part of his own heart, waiting to be welcomed in. The fog, seen rightly, is a messenger like all the others, and the response is the one we have practiced since the night under the fig tree. Recognition. This is dullness. I see you. There is a saying among meditation teachers that sounds like a joke and is entirely serious. A dull sitting is a successful sitting, as long as you know it is dull. Because the knowing is the whole practice. Awareness that says, clearly and without judgment, the mind is foggy right now, is not foggy awareness. It is the lamp, shining steadily, describing the weather. The fog covers everything except the one who notices the fog. This changes what a difficult day means. On the bright days, awareness is easy, and we learn little about it. On the dim days, when we keep noticing through the heaviness, we are building the very faculty the whole path depends on. A sailor learns more in mist than in sunshine. So the dim days are not interruptions of the practice. In their own slow fashion, they are the practice, and some of its deepest lessons arrive in no other weather. But there is another cause of dullness still to mention, and the Buddha himself addressed it with one of his own students, in a teaching that has comforted strivers in every generation since. Among the Buddha's monks was one named Sona, who had been raised in wealth and comfort and had given it all up for the path. His feet had been so soft, the old texts say, that fine hair grew on the soles of them. Perhaps because he had given up so much, he felt he had to prove the sacrifice was worthy, and he practiced with tremendous force. He pushed himself in walking meditation until his feet ached. He allowed himself little rest. He strained at stillness as if it were a stone to be split. And after months of this, he found himself worse off than when he began. His mind swung between exhaustion and agitation. The fog visited him daily, and a bitter thought took root. Perhaps I am not suited for this life. Perhaps I should return to my family's house, live generously, and give up the path. The Buddha came to him and asked about his state, and Sona confessed everything, including the thought of giving up. The Buddha did not lecture him. He asked a question instead. Sona, when you lived at home, you were skilled at the lute, were you not? I was, venerable sir. When the strings of your lute were too tight, how was the sound? Poor, venerable sir. Strained and harsh. And when the strings were too loose, also poor, dull and lifeless. And when the strings were neither too tight nor too loose, but evenly tuned, then the lute was full of sound and a joy to play. It is the same with effort, the Buddha said. Strained too tightly, it produces restlessness and exhaustion. Left too slack, it produces heaviness and sleep. Tune your energy evenly, Sona, and the practice will sound. Sona did as his teacher advised. He eased the force and kept the faithfulness. And the texts record that his practice, tuned like his old lute, carried him the whole way. Tuning, not forcing. So much fog lifts with that one adjustment. Some of the heaviness in our days comes from strings pulled too tight, from demanding of the mind a brightness it cannot give on command. And some comes from strings gone slack, from drifting without any intention at all. The middle is found the same way a musician finds it, not by formula, but by listening, easing here, firming there, until something in the day begins to sound. This is true far beyond the meditation cushion. A life strung too tight, all obligation and no rest, goes dull from exhaustion. A life strung too loose, all drift and no purpose, goes dull from emptiness. The lute does not ask which string broke. It only asks to be tuned. And the tuning is never finished once and for all. Seasons change, burdens change, the body changes, and the wise keep one ear on the sound of their own days, adjusting as they go, the same small patient adjustments Sona learned to make. And for the fog that remains even then, the old monasteries kept one more teaching, passed from elders to discouraged students in every generation. There was a young monk in a far northern monastery who rose before dawn each day and sat long into the night, and every afternoon, without fail, the heaviness took him. He fought it for months and counted every foggy hour as a defeat. When at last he brought his discouragement to the abbot said this: "You are measuring the wrong thing. What matters on this path is not the continuity of clarity. It is the continuity of effort. Clarity comes and goes with the hours, like light through clouds, and no one commands the clouds. But returning, that is yours. Each time you notice the fog and turn again toward the breath, the practice deepens, whether the moment is bright or dim. The water does not wear down the stone by being forceful. It wears it down by returning." The young monk's afternoons did not change much after that, but his heart toward them changed completely. The foggy hours counted. They had always counted. He simply had not known it. Something from this teaching can travel with you into ordinary days. When the heaviness comes, you might ask, kindly and without demand, which fog is this? If the body is tired, honor it. Rest without guilt, and count the rest as wisdom. If something feels guarded, you need not force the door. Just knowing a door is there changes everything. And on the dim days when neither answer comes, let returning be enough. One clear breath inside the fog is still a clear breath. And if the drowsiness comes at the end of a long day, when the work is done and the evening is yours, there is no battle to fight at all. An old meditation teacher, asked what a student should do when sleep overtakes the sitting, answered simply, "Then sleep has come, and sleep is what is needed. Take it as a good sign. You are at ease enough to rest. The body knows things the mind forgets, and one of them is when the day is truly finished." We will settle here for a little while. If heaviness is near you now, let it be. It is welcome here. When you are ready, the path goes on, and we will follow it together. Three of the 5 hindrances are behind us now: wanting, aversion, and dullness. The 4th visitor is restlessness, and it works in the opposite direction from the fog. Where dullness sinks the mind, restlessness sets it running. It is a familiar visitor. A person sits down, and within a minute, the body wants to stand up. The legs want to shift. The hands look for something to do. There is energy in the body with nowhere to go. And the mind has its own version. Thoughts jump from one thing to the next. The mind takes up tomorrow's conversation, then a problem from next month, then something said 3 years ago, then tomorrow again, as if checking it one more time could change it. The Buddha paired restlessness with worry because the two almost always travel together. Worry is the restless mind given a direction. It runs ahead into the future, imagining troubles that have not happened. And it runs backward too. The old texts call that side of it remorse. You return to something said or left unsaid, a choice made years ago, and you replay it again and again, even though no amount of replaying can change how it went. This is the visitor that loves the late hours most. The body lies down, tired and ready for rest, and the mind keeps working. Lists, questions, rehearsals. And the harder you tell yourself to stop thinking, the more thinking there is, because the telling is just one more thought. By morning, the mind has done a full day's labor, and the body has not rested an hour. The Buddha understood this completely, and his teaching on restlessness begins with a bowl of water. In one of his discourses, the Buddha described what each hindrance does to the mind, and for each one, he offered the image of a bowl of clear water. A person looks into the water hoping to see their own reflection. When restlessness is present, he said, it is as if wind moves across the bowl. The surface ripples and trembles, and the reflection breaks into pieces. The face is still there. The water is still clear, but nothing true can be seen until the surface settles. Everything about restlessness is in that image. The agitation is not dirt in the water. It is movement on the surface. And movement has one honest cure, which is not more movement. The image explains something else as well, something people notice on their restless nights without knowing why. In an agitated hour, we lose track of what we actually think and feel. Decisions that seemed clear in the afternoon turn doubtful. Small problems look enormous. We cannot tell whether we are upset about the thing itself or about 6 other things standing behind it. That is the broken reflection. Nothing has happened to the face. The wind is simply on the water, and every judgment made while the surface trembles inherits the trembling. The old advice to never make a big decision at midnight is this same teaching, discovered by grandmothers instead of monks. The old texts tell of an afternoon when the Buddha taught this to his attendant on the road. They had been walking since early morning along a dusty highway between towns, and the day had grown hot. When they stopped at last, in the shade of a grove, the Buddha was thirsty, and he asked his attendant to go back to a stream they had crossed a little way behind and bring water. The attendant went gladly, but he returned with empty hands. "Venerable sir, a line of carts has just crossed the stream. 500 of them, one after another. The wheels have churned the bed, and the water is full of mud. It is not fit to drink. There is a river further ahead. Let us walk on and drink there. We will rest here," the Buddha said. And they rested. After a while, he asked his attendant to go to the stream again. The attendant was puzzled. The carts had only just passed, and the river ahead was clean and certain. But he went and found the water still clouded and returned again with the empty bowl. The Buddha received the news calmly and let more time pass, and then, to the attendant's growing confusion, sent him a third time. This time the attendant came back with a full bowl and with wonder on his face. "Venerable sir, the stream is clear. The mud has all settled to the bottom. The water is pure again, and no one did anything at all. It is the same with the mind," the Buddha said. "When it is stirred, do not stir it further. Give it time, and it settles on its own. Stillness is its nature." No one strained that stream through cloth. No one reached in to press the mud down. The stream needed only one thing, which was to be left alone, and clarity returned by itself, because clarity is what water does when nothing is disturbing it. The same discovery waits inside every restless evening. The agitation feels like a problem demanding action, and so we act. We argue with our thoughts. We plan harder, hoping to exhaust the planning. We scold ourselves for being wound up, which winds us tighter. Every one of these is another cart crossing the stream. The mind never gets its hour of being left alone, and so it never shows us what it does when left alone. Leaving the mind alone does not mean forcing it blank, and it does not mean abandoning it. It means keeping it company without managing it. You sit beside the stirred water as you might sit beside a child who has had a long, overwhelming day. You do not demand explanations. You do not begin solving. You stay near, you breathe, and the storm spends itself, because storms always do when no one feeds them. The thoughts continue for a while, and you let them be thoughts, the same way you let the rain be rain, and somewhere in that allowing, the settling begins without your help. Lao Tzu, the old Chinese sage whose teachings flowed into Zen centuries later, asked a question that has traveled well. Do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water is clear? Not the strength, not the discipline, the patience. Settling cannot be forced for the same reason a flower cannot be pulled open. It happens on its own schedule, and our only real choice is whether to let it. And the mud itself has a secret that changes how the whole experience feels. Meditation teachers in the Insight tradition use the image of washing clothes. When you wash a dusty robe in a basin, the water turns cloudy. No one looks at the cloudy water and says the washing has failed. The cloudiness is the washing. The dust is leaving the cloth and entering the water exactly as it should. A mind growing still works the same way. As the surface begins to settle, the stirred-up contents of the day rise into view. Worries you had not noticed you were carrying. Tension from a conversation. Plans, regrets, fragments. People often take this as proof that their practice is going badly. It is usually proof that it is going well. The dust is leaving the cloth. You are not becoming more agitated. You are finally seeing the agitation that was there all along, on its way out. There is a Zen story about two monks who learned where restlessness actually lives. They were standing in a temple courtyard on a windy day, waiting with the others for a teaching to begin, and above the gate, the temple flag was snapping and rippling on its pole. One of them watched it for a while, and as monks will, he made an observation. "The flag is moving," said the first. "No," said the second. "The wind is moving. The flag only follows. The flag moves. I am watching it move. You are watching the wind, wearing the flag." Back and forth they went. What had begun as a passing remark grew roots and branches. Each monk built his argument higher, and a few other monks drifted over and took sides, and soon half the courtyard was divided between the flag and the wind, and the afternoon stillness was gone entirely. The discussion itself had begun to flap and ripple like the thing they were debating. They could not let it rest, and so they brought the question to the master of the temple, each side confident it would be declared right. The master listened to all of it. Then he said, "Not the flag, not the wind. It is your mind that is moving." The courtyard went silent. All afternoon, they had located the disturbance outside themselves, in the flag, in the wind, in each other's stubbornness. The master had simply pointed at the one place no one had looked. It is your mind that is moving. At first, this can sound like an accusation, but it is the opposite. Because if the disturbance lived in the flag, you would have to still every flag in the world. If your restlessness lived in your unfinished tasks, in other people, in the news, in tomorrow, then peace would require fixing all of it first, and no one has ever finished fixing the world. But if the movement is in the mind, then the work is in one place only, and it is a place you can actually reach. You cannot calm the wind. You can let the bowl of water sit unshaken in the middle of it. This is also where worry loses some of its authority. Watch what worry actually does. It rehearses futures, scene after scene, most of which will never be performed. It replays the past, editing scenes that cannot be reshot. It is the mind pacing between two rooms, yesterday and tomorrow, and neither room exists tonight. The body knows this even when the mind forgets. The body cannot breathe tomorrow's breath or feel yesterday's evening. It lives here only. Which is why, in every Buddhist tradition, the breath is the anchor offered to restless minds. Not because breathing is sacred, but because the breath is always happening now, and attention resting on it is attention that has come home. One more teaching belongs to this visitor, and it is the kindest of them. In the meditation halls, students sometimes have sittings that feel like storms. The energy surges, the thoughts swarm, and every minute is spent wanting to stand up. Students come out of such sittings discouraged, certain they have failed. And teachers in the Thai forest tradition and the insight schools tell them again and again the same surprising thing. That was a successful sitting. You stayed. The storm blew through, and you remained on your cushion, and you felt it all, and nothing was harmed. No one has ever been injured by simply feeling restless. The feeling is loud, but it is only weather, and you have now proven to yourself that you can be present in weather. Something else tends to happen in those storm sittings, and students discover it only by staying. Somewhere in the middle of all that churning, often without warning, there comes a strange moment of separation. The restlessness goes on roaring, and yet some part of you is watching it roar, unhurried, almost curious. The wind and the one who feels the wind turn out to be two different things. It is the bowl of water again. The surface leaps and trembles, and the bowl itself does not move. People can practice for years on calm days and never meet this. The storm shows it in an afternoon. That proof matters more than 100 calm sittings. Calm teaches you that stillness is pleasant. Storms teach you that you are larger than your storms. The restless evening you sat through becomes a fact you carry, and the next storm arrives to find someone who has stopped being afraid of wind. So when the pacing starts, in the mind or in the limbs, there is no battle to win. You might simply name what has arrived. Restlessness is here. Energy is moving. And then let the bowl sit. The mud knows how to settle. It has known since before you were born, and it asks nothing of you but time. Let everything settle now for a few moments, with nothing to stir and nowhere to be. The surface grows smooth on its own. Whenever it suits you, we will continue down the path. We have met 4 of the 5 hindrances now: wanting, aversion, dullness, and restlessness. one remains, and Buddhist teachers across every lineage, from the Zen masters of Japan to the forest monks of Thailand, agree it deserves the most careful watching. Doubt. It works differently from the others. It does not pull at you like wanting, or burn like aversion, or cloud your eyes like fog, or stir you like restlessness. It arrives as a voice, and the voice sounds exactly like your own. It says, "I cannot do this." It says, "This is not working." It says, "Other people can find peace, but not me, not with my mind, not with my life." It asks, "What is the point?" And it asks in such a reasonable tone that we rarely think to question it. It has quieter forms too. The hesitation that keeps a good intention from ever becoming a first step. The endless weighing of paths, this practice or that one, this choice or the other, where the weighing itself becomes a way of never walking. The vague feeling, on an ordinary evening, that whatever you are doing, you should probably be doing something else. Doubt rarely shouts. It murmurs and reconsiders and asks for more time, and the years go by. Why does this one deserve the most careful watching? Because the other four merely disturb the practice. Wanting interrupts it, aversion heats it, dullness dims it, restlessness shakes it, and through all of that, the practice continues. Doubt is different. Doubt persuades us to set the practice down and walk away. The other visitors trouble the traveler. This one convinces the traveler there is no road. The Buddha gave doubt its own image in his teaching of the bowls of water. For restlessness, the bowl stood in the wind. For doubt, he said, imagine a bowl of muddy water, stirred and dark, and then carried into a windowless room and set down in the shadows. A person bends over it, looking for their own reflection, and sees nothing at all. Mud and darkness together. That is what doubt does. It does not only stir the mind, it hides us from ourselves. Under its influence, we cannot see our own face, which is to say, we cannot see our own strength, our own progress, our own goodness. The qualities are still there, the same face above the same bowl. But the voice says, there is nothing in you to see, and in that darkness the claim feels true. So the first thing to know about doubt is that it speaks with confidence about things it cannot see. It declares the water empty when the truth is only that the room is dark. There is an old story from the East about a young fish who was troubled by a question. She had grown up in good water, among reeds and sunken stones, in currents she knew so well she no longer felt them. Her days were ordinary. She fed, she rested, she drifted with her kin in the warm shallows when the light came slanting down in the afternoons. Then one evening she heard the elders speak of something called the Great Ocean. They spoke of it with reverence. Vast, they said, deep beyond measure, the source and home of all things. And the young fish, who had spent her whole life in what seemed to her ordinary water, began to ache to find it. Her own world felt suddenly small. Whatever the great ocean was, it was clearly elsewhere, and elsewhere was where she needed to go. She asked a passing silverfish, "Where is the great ocean?" The silverfish flicked her tail. "I am busy. Ask someone older." She asked a wise-looking carp who lived near the reeds. "I have heard of it," the carp said gravely. "They say it lies far to the east, or perhaps the west. I have never found it myself." So she swam. Days and nights she swam, through warm currents and cold ones, past shoals and shipwrecks, and forests of swaying weed, asking everyone she met. Some had never heard of the ocean. Some pointed in different directions, each with great confidence. One told her it was a story for children. With every empty answer, the voice inside her grew more sure of itself. There is no ocean, or if there is, it is not for you. You are a small fish from a small place, and you were foolish to look. She was ready to turn back when she came upon an old fish resting in the shadow of a rock, his scales pale with age. She asked her question one last time, with hardly any hope left in it. "Can you tell me where the great ocean is?" The old fish looked at her for a long moment, and his eyes were kind. "You have been swimming in it since the day you were born," he said. "It is around you at this moment. It is what carries you when you rest, and what parts before you when you move. You could not leave it if you tried. You looked for it everywhere, except where you are." The young fish hung still in the water. Then, for the first time in her life, she felt the ocean. Not as something far away with a grand name, but as the very thing that had been holding her all along. The water against her sides was the great deep. It always had been. Even her long doubting search had taken place inside the very thing she doubted. What the ocean was to the fish, the present moment is to us. People hear about peace, about presence, about the still bright awareness the Buddha described, and they set out to find it as if it were a distant country. They look for it in the next book, the next teacher, the next year, the better version of themselves that is always about to begin. And when it is not found in any of those places, the soft voice draws its conclusion. It must not exist, or it exists for others, but not for you. But presence was never somewhere else. It is the water you are swimming in. It is this breath, this room, this moment holding you, the same moment that has held you through your entire life. To doubt the practice of being present is, in the end, to doubt that this moment exists, and it does exist, more certainly than anything else we could name. The fish was never lost. She was only looking past what she was made of. This is why the masters answer doubts about the path in such a disarming fashion. A student says, "I do not know if this practice works for someone like me." And the teacher does not argue or produce proofs. The teacher asks, "Are you breathing right now? Can you feel it?" And the student, somewhat suspicious, admits that yes, there is breath, it can be felt. Then it works, the teacher says. That is the entire practice. Being here, for one breath, with what is actually happening. Everything else is that, repeated. The student came, expecting to debate a philosophy, and was handed something too simple to doubt. Still, the voice is persistent, and it does its strongest work when we are close to something good. There is a story travelers in the mountains used to tell about this. A man had walked for many weeks toward a high pass. Beyond it, he had been told, lay the green valley he was seeking. He had crossed 3 rivers to get this far. He had slept in barns and under hedges, mended his pack twice, and learned the weather of the hills the slow way. The road had been long. His sandals were worn thin, his provisions low, and on the final morning, with the pass at last visible above him, he met another traveler coming down, a man with a smooth voice and unworn shoes. "Turn back," the stranger said. "I have come from up there. There is no pass. The road ends in stone." "I can see the pass from here," the man said. "A trick of the light. Many have seen it. Stronger men than you have climbed all day and come back weeping. You are tired. Your supplies are low. Be sensible and go home." And everything the stranger said found something true to attach to. The man was tired. His supplies were low. The doubts in the stranger's mouth were his own doubts, spoken aloud, and that made them sound like wisdom. But the man had walked too far to surrender his own eyes. He looked up at the pass, plain in the morning light. He looked at the stranger's shoes, smooth as river stones, unmarked by any mountain. And he said, "Thank you. I will see for myself." He took one step up the road and then another. And here is the detail the travelers always kept at the end of the story. The stranger did not follow him. He never follows. His whole power lives at the crossroads, in the moment of deciding. Against a person already walking, he has nothing. The man crested the pass before sundown. The valley was green, just as he had been told, and the road through it ran wide and easy, as if the mountain had spent all its difficulty on the question of whether to begin. Doubt's power lives at the crossroads. This is why the old teachers respected it and why they refused to fear it. And they offered remedies, each one simple. The first is the one that disarms every visitor. Recognition. The moment you hear the voice and know it as a voice, something fundamental has shifted. Doubt works only while it is mistaken for your own clear judgment. Named, it becomes one more guest in the hall. Ah, doubt is here, saying its old lines. And they truly are old lines. Listen for them and you will find the script has barely changed in years. You are not the kind of person who finishes things. It is too late to start. Others can, you cannot. The same sentences that visited you at 20, visit at 40 and at 70. Word for word, never updated, never once accounting for everything you have done in the meantime. A voice that has not revised its opinion of you in decades is not perceiving you. It is reciting. The second remedy the texts call faith, and the word means something plainer than it sounds. Not belief without evidence. Confidence built from evidence. The man on the mountain did not defeat the stranger with hope. He defeated him with his own eyes and his own miles. In the same way, you have evidence. You have come through every difficult thing your life has asked of you so far. You have learned, endured, softened, begun again. The voice never mentions any of this, which tells you something about the voice. In Buddhism, remembering your own goodness is not vanity. It is taught as a virtue. To recall a kindness you did, a patience you kept, an effort you made, and to let yourself be glad about it is considered nourishment for the path, as deliberate and wholesome as any meditation. Many people find this difficult at first. It feels like boasting, even in the privacy of their own heart. But the tradition is careful here. Pride measures itself against others and builds a wall. This rejoicing measures nothing and builds nothing. It simply takes honest note of the good, the same honest note the doubting voice takes of the bad, and the heart that practices it slowly comes back into balance. The bowl is carried out of the dark room into the light, and the face was there all along. And for the stubborn hours when the voice will not stop, the masters kept one last remedy, half playful and entirely serious. Doubt the doubt. The voice claims certainty about your future, your limits, your worth. Ask it gently, how do you know? It has never once answered. It has predicted your failure 1,000 times, and here you are, still walking, which makes it perhaps the least reliable forecaster you have ever trusted. So, when the soft voice comes, in the middle of an effort or in the middle of the night, it can be met like every visitor before it. Seen, named, allowed to say its lines and leave. You need not argue with it. The man on the mountain did not argue. He simply kept walking, and the road did the rest. We will pause here, at the top of our own small pass. All 5 visitors have now been met, and there is nothing more to carry up the hill tonight. Rest a moment in that. When you are ready, we will walk down the other side together. All 5 visitors have now been met. Wanting, aversion, dullness, restlessness, and doubt. Each one has been named, and each one, named, has shown the same secret. They are guests, not residents. They draw their power from going unrecognized, and they lose it in the light of simple seeing. A question naturally follows. What do we do with this knowledge in an ordinary life? The visitors will keep coming. The Buddha himself was visited until the end of his days. So the lasting work is not to finish with them. It is to find the right way of receiving them, a posture of the heart that can be held not just in meditation but on a crowded morning, in a difficult conversation, in the middle of the night. The Buddha's own posture, we have seen, was recognition without battle. Mara, I see you. No sword, no argument, no fleeing. The teachers who came after him searched for ways to describe what that seeing feels like from the inside, and one description has proven especially useful. It is the attitude of a naturalist. A naturalist walks into the forest with no wish to change it. She does not scold the rain for falling or instruct the birds to sing differently. She watches. She learns the habits of things. She gives the forest her full attention and her full respect, and she interferes with nothing. Over the years, this watching becomes a kind of intimacy. Nothing in the forest is her enemy, because everything in the forest has become known. To bring that same watching to our own inner life is the heart of mindfulness. There is a story about an old man who lived at the edge of a great forest, and a young hunter who came to him with a problem. The old man had spent 50 years walking the forest paths. He had no weapons and set no traps. He simply watched. He knew where the deer crossed the stream at dawn and where the fox denned in autumn. He knew which trees the owls favored and what the silence of the small birds meant. The villagers called him the forest's oldest friend, and when their children were curious about the woods, they sent them to him. The young hunter who came to him one summer evening was not curious. He was ashamed. He sat down across from the old man and confessed it plainly. "I am afraid of the deep woods," he said. "I hunt the edges only. When the trees close overhead and the light goes green, my heart pounds and I turn back. The other hunters go in. I cannot. And yet you walk there alone, an old man with a walking stick, in the dark if it pleases you. How? What weapon do you carry that I do not?" "No weapon," the old man said. "I carry acquaintance." The hunter did not understand, so the old man took him into the forest that evening to show him. They walked in past the green light that always turned the hunter back, and the old man chose a fallen tree, and they sat. "Now we watch," he said. "We do not move, we do not judge, and we do not interfere. The forest will forget us, and then it will show itself. They sat as the light faded. The hunter's heart pounded at every sound, and the old man named each one in a low voice. That crashing that sounds like a bear is a squirrel turning over leaves. They are louder than you would believe. That cry is a fox calling to her own, no concern of ours. That great grey shape drifting between the trees is an owl beginning her evening rounds, the same rounds she has made every night of her life. Hour by hour, the sounds stopped being omens and became neighbours. A doe stepped into the clearing with her fawn, looked at the two still figures without alarm, and bent to feed. The hunter watched her and found that his heart had grown level without his noticing. On the walk home, he was silent for a long while. Then he said, "Nothing out there changed tonight. But everything is different. That is what watching does," the old man said. "Fear is mostly unfamiliarity. I am not braver than you. I have simply been introduced." The hunter came back, that summer and the next. He learned to sit through dusk on his own, and then through nightfall, and the deep woods opened to him, one acquaintance at a time. In his later years, the villagers noticed something else about him, something he had not gone into the forest to find. He had become difficult to anger and almost impossible to alarm. Asked about it once, he thought for a moment and said that a man who has learned to sit still while a forest wakes up around him finds that most other things hold still enough. Fear is mostly unfamiliarity. The same is true within. Most people are strangers to their own anger, their own worry, their own wanting. They have lived alongside these forces for decades and never once sat still and watched one move. So every arising feels like the crashing of a bear, enormous and unknown, and the only responses that occur to us are fighting and turning back. The naturalist's discovery is that the inner forest works exactly as the outer one does. Sat with, watched without interference, the great shapes resolve into knowable creatures with habits and hours and paths. Anger has a way of beginning in the chest before a single thought appears. Worry has a favorite hour. Wanting has a particular sweetness as it approaches. None of this can be learned while fighting. All of it can be learned while watching. It matters to say what this watching is not, because the mind has a counterfeit version of it. Brooding also stares at a feeling for hours, and brooding makes everything worse. The difference is the difference between the naturalist and the man arguing with the forest. Brooding analyzes, blames, builds cases, asks why me, and stirs the water with every question. Watching simply attends. It feels where the feeling lives in the body, follows it as it swells and fades, and adds nothing. One sentence of inner commentary versus none. That small difference separates an hour that exhausts from an hour that teaches. And watching, over time, becomes something like expertise. The old teachers spoke of becoming a connoisseur of one's own hindrances, and they meant it without irony. A person who has observed their own irritation 100 times begins to recognize it at greater and greater distances. First, we notice the storm after it has soaked the whole afternoon. Then we notice the first thunder. Then the change in the air before any cloud appears. Eventually, the visitor is recognized at the gate, while it is still small, and a visitor recognized at the gate hardly troubles the house at all. The deepening has a shape, and it helps to know it in advance. Awareness grows the way ripples grow on a pond, in widening circles. For a while, the widening is easy, and the practice feels pleasant, calmer, clearer. Then the circle reaches an edge, some part of the inner forest that has never been visited, where something waits that was put away long ago. At that edge there is resistance, and the practice suddenly feels harder, and people often conclude they are going backward. They are not. A circle that never met an edge would be a circle that had stopped growing. The teachers of the Insight tradition tell their students this in every generation. When the difficult region appears, you have not lost the path. You have arrived at the next part of it. The naturalist who only ever walks the sunny meadow learns the meadow. The forest gives itself to those who keep walking when the light goes green. The Zen master Dogen wrote that to study the way is to study the self. The forest the old man knew was outside his door. The forest the practice asks us to know is closer still, and it deserves the same patient, respectful attention. Nothing in it is wrong. The naturalist does not look at the fox and call it a mistake. The inner life, watched with that same respect, turns out to be no more a wilderness of enemies than the woods were. It is a living place, with weather and seasons and creatures, all of them workable, all of them, in the end, familiar. There is another picture of this posture, told as the story of an innkeeper at a mountain crossroads. Her inn stood where two old roads met, the only roof for a day's walk in any direction, and so every kind of traveller came through her door. Merchants and pilgrims, the cheerful and the grieving, the courteous and the rude. She turned no one away, and she had run the inn so long that nothing surprised her. One autumn, she took on a young helper from the village below, and the girl had not been there a month before the complaints began. The man in the corner room has done nothing but grumble since he arrived, the girl said one evening. The food is too plain, the blankets too thin, the mountain too cold. Why do you smile at him and bring him more soup? I would have shown him the door. The innkeeper kept kneading the bread. How long is he staying? One night, like the rest of them. One night, the innkeeper agreed. Every guest who has ever come through that door has stayed a night, or 2, or 10, and then the road has taken them on. The pleasant ones leave. The difficult ones leave. In 30 years, not one has stayed. When you know that in your bones, child, you will find you can be kind to anyone. Kindness for a night is not so very much to ask of us. The girl was not fully convinced, but she stayed, and she watched. She watched her mistress receive a bitter old traveller with the same warmth as a laughing one, and she noticed that the bitterness, often softened by morning, at a table where no one fought it. She watched the grieving be given the corner room with the morning light and quietness, which was what they had wanted and could not ask for. And she noticed something the innkeeper had never mentioned. The difficult guests, more often than the easy ones, left things behind. Not coins, other things. The grumbling man, it turned out, knew the mountain passes better than anyone alive, and over his soup he taught the innkeeper a safer route for winter travellers, and she used it for years. A sharp-tongued woman left behind, of all things, a remedy for fever that later saved the helper's own brother. It was as if the hard guests carried gifts that could only be set down in a house that did not turn them away. Years later, when the helper had an inn of her own, travellers said of her what they had said of her mistress. Whatever walks through that door is received. And her rooms, like her mistress's rooms, were peaceful, not because the guests were easy, but because the keeper was. Every guest stays a night. The grief, the fear, the irritation, the wave of wanting, each one feels permanent while it is in the house, and not one of them has ever stayed. 30 years of evenings prove it, in an inn or in a heart. And the difficult guests do carry gifts, though they can only set them down where they are received. Sorrow, welcomed rather than barricaded out, leaves behind a tenderness toward other people's sorrow. Fear, sat with, leaves a map of what we truly care about, because we only fear for what we love. Even restlessness, watched closely, often turns out to be pointing at some part of life that has been asking for attention. The visitors are not punishments. Some of them are messengers who have been knocking for a long time. It changes the texture of a whole life, receiving things this way. Most of the exhaustion in a difficult season comes not from the difficulty itself, but from the constant work of guarding the door, deciding what may enter and what must be kept out, bracing against half of one's own experience. The keeper who has stopped guarding has energy to spare, and her guests, oddly enough, behave better for it. Feelings that are fought tend to dig in. Feelings that are housed tend to move on. The innkeeper learned this from 30 years of travelers, and the meditation halls have taught it ever since the Buddha's time. Resistance lengthens the stay. Welcome shortens it. So the posture, in the end, is hospitality with open eyes. Not the naive welcome that believes every guest, and not the locked door that exhausts the keeper. The naturalist's respect, the innkeeper's patience, the Buddha's lamp. Whatever arrives is seen, named, given its night, and released to the road. In the days ahead, when something difficult arrives in the mind, it might be received in that spirit. This guest, too, stays only a night. It can be watched the way the old man watched his forest, with attention and without judgment. And it may, on its way out, leave something at the door. Let us rest in that hospitality for a moment, with the doors of the heart open and nothing to defend. When the time feels right, we will take the next turn of the path together. We have learned to recognize the 5 visitors, and we have found the posture for receiving them, the watching heart of the naturalist, the patience of the innkeeper. One more question remains before our journey closes, and it is a practical one. When strong weather is moving through a life, what holds the life steady? A storm can be watched with perfect understanding and still be a storm. Feelings arise that ask to be acted on. Anger wants words spoken. Wanting wants chasing. Doubt wants quitting. In the space between feeling something and acting on it, every person needs something to hold them, the way a riverbank holds a river. Watching alone is the lamp, and the lamp is essential, but a lamp is not a house. The Buddha, who gave his students the practice of awareness, gave them this as well. He offered 5 simple commitments, known as the precepts: to care for life and do no harm, to take only what is freely given, to speak truthfully and kindly, to honor trust in our closest bonds, to keep the mind clear. 5 sentences, more or less, and they have accompanied the meditation across all the centuries since, because the old teachers understood that the two belong together. Now, commitments of this kind can sound heavy at first. Many people hear any talk of conduct as a list of demands, a finger pointed from outside, and the heart closes a little. So here is what the precepts are not. There is no judge in Buddhism keeping a ledger. There is no concept of sin at all. The Buddha did not hand down laws from a mountain. He described something as a physician describes health. He had seen what a heart looks like when fear and ill will have left it, and he noticed that such a heart behaves in certain ways. It does not harm. It does not grasp. It does not deceive. The precepts are a portrait of fearlessness drawn from life, which means they are not orders to obey. They are a description of where the path leads, offered as a companion for the walk. A teacher in the insight tradition put the distinction in two small words. There are shoulds and there are coulds. A should comes from outside, carries a threat in its pocket, and produces guilt when it is not met. A could comes from within. It names a possibility, something a person senses they are capable of becoming, and it produces invitation rather than pressure. The same sentence can be either one. Spoken as a should, speak truthfully sounds like a commandment with a watching eye behind it. Heard as a could, it sounds like news about ourselves. You could live in such a way that your words and your heart match. It is within you. The precepts, rightly received, are 5 coulds, and the difference shows in the people who keep them, because a kept should produces relief at most, while a lived could produces something the old texts describe again and again, which is joy. There is a Zen story about a student who struggled with exactly this. He had come to the monastery for meditation, for stillness, for the deep questions, and instead he found himself surrounded by guidelines. How to speak, how to handle the food, how to conduct himself in the hall and the garden and the town. After some months his patience thinned, and he brought his complaint to the old master, respectfully but plainly. I came here seeking freedom, he said, and I have found rules. Why does a path to liberation have so many fences? The master did not answer at once. It was evening, and he picked up the water jar that stood by the door and motioned for the student to follow him into the courtyard. The moon was rising over the wall, nearly full. The master tipped the jar and poured half the water out onto the courtyard stones. It spread at once in every direction, thinned to a film, ran into the cracks, and was gone. The stones drank some, and the air would take the rest. Within moments there was nothing to see. Then the master filled a wide bowl with the water that remained, and set the bowl on the wall, beneath the open sky. He waited for the surface to settle, and then he beckoned the student over. Look. The student looked into the bowl. The water had grown perfectly still, and there in its small circle floated the moon, complete and bright, trembling only slightly, as if it had been placed there on purpose. The water on the stones was free, the master said. No edge held it. And where is it now? The water in the bowl is held on every side, and it carries the moon. He turned to the student. You may think the bowl is the water's prison. The water, if it could speak, would call it something else. The same water. Poured out, it became a film on stone, gone by morning. Held, it became deep enough and still enough to hold the sky. Nothing about the water changed, only whether something held it. A life works on the same principle. Energy, feeling, passion, attention, these are the water, and they are precious. Scattered in every direction, acting on every impulse as it rises, they thin out and disappear into the cracks of the days. Held within a few faithful commitments, the same energy gathers, deepens, settles, and begins to reflect something. The commitments are not the point, any more than the bowl is the point. The stillness is the point. The depth is the point. But there is no depth without a vessel to hold it. And this is what the old teachers meant when they called the precepts a container for the practice. Meditation stirs the waters of a life. Old feelings surface. Strong energies move. Awareness, as it opens to everything, the tender things and the turbulent ones alike. The person who has made a few simple promises to themselves can let all of it arise safely, because feeling something and acting on it have come apart. The anger can burn and be watched, because there is a standing commitment not to harm. The wanting can surge and be studied, because there is a standing commitment not to grasp at what is not given. Within the vessel, nothing that arises is dangerous, and so nothing needs to be suppressed. The container does not shut life out. It is the very thing that makes it safe to let life in. Teachers see this rescue happen in quiet ways all the time. A person's practice deepens, and the heart opens wider than it has ever opened, and powerful feelings arrive that the person never expected and does not know what to do with. Affections, longings, surges of warmth toward the whole world and toward particular people in it. An open heart is a strong current. Without banks, a strong current floods, and the flood can sweep away things that took years to build. With banks, the same current becomes a deep river, and everyone living near it is nourished. The commitments are the banks. They let a person feel everything fully, honor all of it, and act only on what their deepest intentions would choose. Nothing is lost in this. The feeling is fully felt. It is the damage that is declined. There is also a quieter gift, one the texts speak of with particular warmth. A person who lives within these commitments accumulates, year by year, the ease of having nothing to hide. They can meet any pair of eyes. They can walk into any room. They carry no secrets that must be managed, no trail that must be covered, none of the low, constant hum of a divided life. The old phrase for this is the bliss of blamelessness, and people who have it rarely name it, because it does not feel like a possession. It feels like lightness. It is one of the deepest comforts available to a human being, and it cannot be bought, only lived into, one ordinary honest day at a time. There is a story about a grandfather, a granddaughter, and a kite, told in many lands with small differences. They had built the kite together over the winter, paper and thin sticks and paste, with a long tail of knotted cloth. The granddaughter had painted it herself, a red sun on a white field, and on the worst grey days of the season she had taken it down from its shelf just to look at it. When the spring winds finally came, they carried it up the hill behind the village, and the grandfather showed her how to let the wind take it, paying out the line a little at a time, and it flew wonderfully, climbing and swooping, the red sun bright against the blue, pulling at the line like a live thing. The granddaughter held the spool, feeling the kite tug against her hands, and after a while a thought arrived, as it arrives to everyone who has ever flown a kite. "Grandfather, look how it pulls. It wants to go higher. The string is holding it back. If we cut the string, it could fly as high as it wished. Above the hill, above the clouds, maybe." The grandfather looked at the kite straining against the bright sky, and he did not lecture. "Shall we see?" he said. He took out his small knife and offered it to her, and she, delighted, cut the line. For one breath, the kite leapt upward, and her heart leapt with it, Then the wind got behind the paper, and the kite wobbled, tipped sideways, and fell, turning over and over, until it dropped into the long grass far down the slope. They walked together to collect it. She held the spent kite and could not understand. "It should have soared," she said. Nothing was holding it down anymore. Nothing was holding it up anymore, her grandfather said. "The string was never holding it down, little one. The kite climbs because something holds it. The string against the wind is what gives it the sky. Cut the string, and the wind owns the kite." They mended it that week and tied a new line, and she flew it for years. And the village said she grew up to be a woman with a long and steady string of her own, who rose higher for it. The string against the wind is what gives it the sky. This is the secret the student in the courtyard learned from the bowl, told again in the language of wind. The commitments that look like restraints are load-bearing. They are what our energy pushes against in order to climb. A promise kept is not a wall around a life. It is the line that lets the life rise without being owned by every gust that crosses it. And how does a person know, in a particular moment, what keeping the string looks like? The Buddha gave a compass for this too, and it is carried entirely within. Before acting, look at the intention. Be still for one breath and feel where the action is coming from. If it rises from fear, from ill will, from grasping, wait. Let the water settle first, as we learned by the muddy stream. If it rises from care, from honesty, from kindness, the way is likely clear. The deed matters, the Buddha taught, but the intention behind the deed matters first. And a person who learns to read their own intentions has the whole teaching in their pocket. The Vietnamese Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, in our own era, stopped calling the precepts rules at all. He called them mindfulness trainings, and he spoke of them as protections. The way a railing on a mountain path is a protection, present not to restrict the walker, but to free her attention for the view. And if a commitment is broken, as commitments are, by every practitioner, in small ways, again and again, nothing is ruined. Remember, there is no ledger. In this tradition, breaking a precept is not a crime committed. It is a moment of forgetting what we love. The response is not punishment but remembering, the same response as when the mind wanders from the breath. We notice, without drama, and we return. The bowl can always be refilled. The string can always be retied. The vessel is patient, and it holds whoever climbs back in. If something of this travels with you into ordinary days, perhaps it is the single breath before acting, the small pause that asks, where is this coming from? Care or fear? That one question, asked honestly, is the whole vessel in miniature, and it is always available, free of charge, in any moment of any day. Let everything be held for a moment now, the breath, the body, the whole long day, resting in something larger that asks nothing of you. When you feel ready, the last stretch of our path is waiting, and we will walk it together. The whole of our journey so far has pointed inward. We found the luminous mind beneath its coverings. We met the 5 visitors and learned their names. We took up the watching heart of the naturalist and the steadiness of the vessel. It would be easy to think the path ends there, in a well-tended inner world. But the old teachers describe something further, and they describe it not as a duty, but as a discovery. People who practice for a while find it happening on its own, often before they have a name for it. The wall between inner and outer begins to soften. The kindness a person learns to offer their own visiting storms starts spilling over the edges onto other people without being sent. The reason is simple once it is seen. The luminous mind was never private property. The Buddha's teaching about the bright awareness beneath the clay was not a teaching about special people. It is the same gold under everyone's coverings. The difficult neighbor has it. The stranger on the road has it. Even a person who is curt and cold has it, buried under that day's particular clay. And the 5 visitors are not yours alone either. Every person you have ever met is hosting the same 5 guests in their own house, with whatever skill they have. The impatient man in the market is being visited by restlessness. The boastful one is being visited by doubt, which boasting often covers. The cold one is keeping a door shut on something that once hurt. To understand the visitors in yourself is, sooner or later, to recognize them in everyone. And recognition, as we have learned all along this path, changes everything it touches. It is hard to condemn a person for hosting the same guests you host. Picture how this works on an ordinary morning. A shopkeeper is curt, almost rude, and the old reflex starts to rise, the story about what kind of person he must be. Then a different thought arrives, quiet and unforced. He is hosting something this morning. Worry, perhaps, or the heavy fog, or an ember someone handed him at breakfast. The rudeness does not become pleasant, but it becomes understandable, the sound of a man having a hard day in there, and what rises in response is no longer the ember of offense but something closer to fellow feeling. Nothing was excused. Something was recognized. The judgment that used to come first arrives later, and something else arrives in its place. The old texts call it metta, loving kindness, and they consider it less a virtue to be manufactured than a fragrance the opening heart gives off naturally. There is a story about a traveler and a lantern that has been told along the mountain roads for a long time. A merchant was walking home to his village late one night. The road was dark, the moon hidden, and he hurried with his hands out before him, anxious about the ruts and stones. Then ahead of him he saw a small light swaying, and he caught up to it gratefully. The light was a paper lantern, and it was carried by an old woman of the village, a woman he knew. She had lived at the village edge all his life, kept a small garden, and walked the road most evenings to visit her sister at the far end. He greeted her, and then he hesitated, because there was something puzzling here, and everyone in the village knew it too. The old woman had been blind since her youth. She heard the hesitation in his silence and laughed softly. "You are wondering about the lantern. Forgive me," the merchant said, "but you have never needed light. Darkness and noon are the same to you. Why carry it?" "The light is not for my eyes," she said. "It is for everyone else's. The night road is busy with people hurrying, just as you were hurrying. Without the lantern, they would not see an old woman in the dark, and they would stumble into me, and we would both be hurt. With it, they see me from far off, and they pass me safely, and some of them find their own footing by my light for a few steps. It cost me one small flame." She walked on a little, and then added, "People ask me your question often. They think kindness is a gift I am giving away. But you see how it is. The same flame that keeps them from stumbling keeps me from being knocked down. I have never been able to find the line where caring for them ends and caring for myself begins. I gave up looking for it years ago. They walked together to the village, sharing the light, and the merchant thought about her words for longer than the road lasted. I have never been able to find the line. The old woman had discovered, in her own practical way, what the Buddhist teaching of resonance points to. Care for others and care for oneself are not two flames. They are one flame, seen from two sides. We tend to imagine kindness as an expense, something poured out of our supply and into someone else's. But warmth does not work like water. A fire loses nothing by lighting another fire, and a heart in the habit of wishing others well lives, all day, inside the wishing, which is a warm place to live. This is why the old teachers insist that loving kindness is intensely practical, nothing sentimental about it. An irritated heart is the first to suffer its own irritation. A kind heart is the first to enjoy its own kindness. Before metta ever reaches another person, it has already changed the weather inside the one who feels it. There is a question people sometimes ask about this, and it deserves an answer. Does wishing well actually do anything, or is it just pleasant thinking? The tradition's answer is patient. Watch what the wishing does to the wisher. A mind repeating, "May you be at ease," cannot, in that same moment, be rehearsing grievances or sharpening fears. The two do not fit in the same breath. So the practice is not magic worked on the world. It is the deliberate keeping of a flame, and a kept flame warms its keeper first, and then the room, and then whoever comes near. The world receives its share in due course, through 1,000 small doors, a softer tone, a moment of patience, a door held, none of them planned. The Buddha taught this to his own monks in a season of difficulty, and the story of it became the source of one of the most cherished texts in his tradition. A band of monks, the old accounts say, once set out to spend the rainy season meditating in a remote forest. The forest was beautiful, with great trees and clear water, and they settled in with high hopes. But the forest, in the way of all forests, in the old stories, had its resident spirits, and the spirits were not pleased. They had lived in those trees a long time, and they did not care for visitors. So, they set about discouraging the monks. Strange sounds in the night. Unsettling shapes glimpsed at the edge of the firelight. A heaviness in the air of the groves. Nothing was harmed, but nothing was peaceful either, and one by one the monks lost their concentration, and then their sleep, and then their nerve. Before the season was half done, they had packed up and walked all the way back to the Buddha. They asked him to send them somewhere else, any other forest. He listened to the whole account, and then he told them they would be returning to the very same forest. The monks' hearts sank, but the Buddha said he would not send them back unarmed. He would give them the only protection they would need, and the protection he gave them was not a weapon or a charm. It was a teaching on loving kindness, a way of dwelling. He taught them to settle the heart, and then to wish well, deliberately and without fences. May all beings be safe. May all beings be at ease. The seen and the unseen, the near and the far, those already born and those yet to come. Even as a mother protects her child, her only child, with her own life, he said, so should one cherish all living beings with a boundless heart. The monks walked back to the forest practicing as they went, and they kept practicing under the great trees, hour after hour, wishing safety and ease to all beings without exception, which included Of course, the spirits themselves. It was not easy at first. The old accounts are honest about that. Walking back toward a place that had frightened them, the monks found the well-wishing thin in their mouths, and fear kept rising to interrupt it. But they had been given a practice, not a feeling, and a practice can be done in any weather. They said the phrases when the warmth was there, and they said them when it was not, and somewhere on that road the phrases began to fill, the way a dry channel fills when the rains return. And the old accounts say the forest changed. The spirits met not with fear and not with resistance, but with the steady warmth of beings who wished them well, grew first curious, then calm, then kind. The strange sounds ceased. The air of the groves grew light. By the end of the season, it is said, the spirits were looking after the monks, sweeping the paths and guarding their stillness, glad of their company. The visitors had become hosts, and the haunted forest had become the most peaceful dwelling in the land. Whether the spirits lived in the trees or in the minds of frightened monks, the teaching lands in the same place. What is met with fear grows fearsome. What is met with goodwill softens. The monks did not defeat the forest. They befriended it, and the befriending began entirely inside their own hearts, hours before it changed anything outside. This is the protection loving kindness offers, and it is real, though it works in an unexpected direction. It does not promise that the world will become harmless. It makes the heart harder to haunt. A mind dwelling in goodwill simply has less surface for fear and resentment to take hold of, the same way a warm room gives frost nothing to form on. And the practice of it can be as small as the old woman's lantern. Walking through a day, a person can silently wish well to the people they pass. May you be at ease. May your troubles be light. No one hears it. Nothing shows. The bus arrives no faster and the line moves no quicker. But the one who spends the day wishing has spent the day in warmth, and people sense warmth without knowing why, and respond to it, and by evening the day has gone differently, in 100 small ways, than it would have gone. The tradition suggests beginning wherever the wishing comes easiest, with someone dearly loved, where the warmth needs no effort at all. Then outward, circle by circle, to friends, to strangers, to the difficult, and somewhere in those circles, deliberately included, oneself. Many people find that last one the hardest, and the teachers are firm about it in their kind way. A lantern that lights the whole road but leaves its own keeper in darkness is not yet finished being lit. May I also be at ease. May my troubles also be light. The wish is not selfish. It is the flame reaching the hand that carries it. The 5 visitors will keep calling on us and on everyone we meet. Knowing that, it becomes a little easier to be patient with the difficult, for they are hosting a hard guest today, and a little easier to be patient with ourselves, for the same reason. One flame, carried for everyone on the road, ourselves included. Let warmth have the next few moments, with nothing to do and no one to become. Perhaps a single silent wish, for anyone at all, including you. And when it feels complete, we will walk the last of the road together. Our journey began with a single sentence, spoken 25 centuries ago. Luminous is this mind, brightly shining, but it is colored by the attachments that visit it. Everything since has been the unfolding of those words. We found the gold beneath the clay and learned that nothing covering it had ever damaged it. We sat beneath the fig tree on the night the visitors came in force, and heard the only answer ever needed. "Mara, I see you." Then the visitors came one by one and showed us their faces. Wanting, with its sweetness and its hidden ache. Aversion, with its heat and its heavy coal. Dullness, the soft fog, sometimes tired and sometimes tender. Restlessness, the wind on the water. And doubt, the soft voice at the crossroads, reciting its old unchanging lines. We learned the watcher's posture from a naturalist in his forest and an innkeeper at her crossroads. We learned what holds a life steady from a bowl of water carrying the moon and a kite climbing against its string. And we learned, walking beside a blind woman and her lantern, that the light we tend in ourselves was never ours alone. Now the road circles home. And here, at its end, one thing should be said plainly about what has and has not changed. Nothing was added to you in these hours. No quality was installed, no improvement bolted on. The whole journey has been a journey of recognition. The luminous mind was there before the first word of the first teaching, and the 5 visitors will call again, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps tonight. What changes, for those who walk this path, is not the weather. It is the relationship with the weather. The guests still knock. The host has stopped being afraid of the knocking. There is a story told about an old woman, a lamp, and a window. She lived alone in a small house at the upper end of a mountain village, the last house before the long road over the pass. And every night of her life, as far back as anyone could remember, she set a lit oil lamp in her window before she slept. Through summer nights when no one passed for weeks, through winter storms when the snow stood to the sills, the small flame burned in her window until morning. The villagers were used to it the way people are used to a star. Children growing up in the lower houses learned to find their bearings by it on winter evenings. Shepherds coming down late from the high pastures took their line from it without thinking. Once, when the old woman was ill for a week and a neighbor tended the lamp in her place, half the village reported sleeping poorly, though no one could say quite why. But one autumn, a young traveler, caught by darkness on the pass road, came down the mountain cold and far past weariness, having walked the last hours toward the one light he could see. She fed him by her fire, and when he had warmed through, his curiosity got the better of his manners. "Grandmother, the lamp in your window saved me tonight. But they tell me in the village it burns every night, and has for 50 years. Who are you waiting for all this time?" The old woman smiled and shook her head. "I am not waiting for anyone." "Then why keep the light?" "Because the road is dark," she said, as if it were the plainest thing in the world. "It was dark before I was born, and it will be dark after me. I cannot light the whole road. I can light my window. Some nights the lamp helps a traveler, like tonight. Most nights it helps no one, and burns for the dark itself. Either way, in the morning the oil is spent, and I fill it again." She leaned forward and tended the fire. "You ask who I am waiting for. Child, the lamp is not a question. It is not waiting for an answer. The light is simply what I have to offer the dark, and so I offer it. That is the whole of it. I sleep very well." The traveler went on his way the next day. But it is said he kept a lamp in his own window all his life, in a village far from there, and never could fully explain to his neighbors why, except that he had once been on a dark road and there had been a light. The light is simply what I have to offer the dark. The old woman, without ever using the words, was living a teaching the Buddha gave in the last season of his long life. His students, knowing his teaching years were ending, asked what they should rely on when he could no longer guide them. And he told them, "Be a lamp unto yourself. Rely on yourself, on the truth within you." The light his students had been seeking in him, he told them, was a light they already carried. It is a remarkable thing for a teacher to say after a lifetime of teaching. He did not say, "Remember my words," or "guard my methods," or appoint a successor to stand where I stood. He pointed each student back to their own window. 45 years of teaching, and the final teaching was that the teacher had never been the source. He had been, at most, a traveler with a lantern, walking beside people on a dark road until they noticed they were carrying lanterns of their own. A lamp asks for nothing. The old woman's flame did not require travelers in order to be worth lighting. It demanded no gratitude, kept no count of who it saved, and was not diminished on the nights when it burned for no one. It simply shone, because shining is what a kept flame does. And this, in the end, is what the luminous mind is like, the one we found in the first hour of our journey under all that clay. It is not waiting for your life to improve before it shines. It is not a reward at the end of the path. It has been burning in the window the whole time, through every storm we have named tonight, wanting and anger and fog and worry and doubt, and not one of them has ever put it out. Not once. The proof is that you are here, aware of these words, which is the flame doing what it has always done. And so we return, one last time, to the place where all of this began. The night beneath the fig tree. We told that story near the start of our journey, from the outside. From here, at the end, it looks different. A man sat down in the evening, and everything unfinished in him rose up. Desire came, and he watched it pass like weather. Fear and anger came, and the arrows turned to flowers as they reached him, because nothing in him rose to meet them as a target. Doubt came with its soft question, and he answered by touching the earth, which is the answer beneath all answers. I am here. And then the long middle of the night, about which the stories say little, because there is little to say. He sat. The visitors had come and been seen, and what remained when they finished was not a battle won. It was a hall, still and open. Hour after hour of simple presence, the host, at rest, in his own house. The river ran in the dark. The stars wheeled slowly over the branches. Somewhere in those hours, the texts say, he saw into the nature of things, how everything arises and passes, how suffering is made, and how it is unmade. But even these great seeings came and went in the stillness like everything else, and the stillness held them all. Toward morning, the sky in the east turned from black to deep blue. The birds had not yet begun. The air carried the cool that comes just before dawn, when the night is finished but the day has not started, and the world seems to hold its breath. And low above the horizon, the morning star rose, the way it had risen every dawn of his life and every dawn before him for 100 million years. He looked at it. That was all. He looked at it, and seeing it, he was awake. No thunder, no vision, no voice from the sky. A point of light, and a mind clear enough to receive it completely. After 6 years of searching the world for awakening, it arrived as the simplest event there is, one thing shining, and someone fully there to see it. The traditions have honored that moment for 2,500 years, and the honoring carries a quiet message for every one of us. If awakening were rare and difficult, it would have come as something rare and difficult. It came as a star seen at dawn. The doorway is that ordinary, and it stands open at the same height in every life. A leaf, a breath, rain on a window, a small flame in the dark. Any of them is enough whenever there is someone present enough to see. And presence enough is not a distant attainment. It has visited every life already, in those unplanned moments when the thinking fell away and there was only the seeing. Moments this journey began with, back among the spring leaves and the night stars of our first hour together. The whole path between then and now has been a single instruction, repeated in different voices. The clay can be loosened. The water can settle. The guests can be greeted. And when the covering thins, even for the length of one breath, what looks through is the same awareness that looked up from under the fig tree and met the morning star. The visitors will return. Let them. They are old acquaintances now, and they have been thoroughly introduced. Wanting will arrive with its sweetness and be seen. The heat will rise and be seen. The fog, the wind, the soft voice at the crossroads, each will be met at the door by a host who knows their names, gives them their night, and lets the road take them on. And there is no hurry about any of it. The hunter needed more than one evening in the forest. The scribe needed weeks at his desk before the old monk sat down beside him. The stonecutter traveled through every form in the world before he came home to his hammer. The path is patient because it is going nowhere new. Every step of it leads back to what was already here, and a road like that cannot be failed, only walked at whatever pace a life allows. And beneath all of it, through all of it, the lamp in the window, the mind that was never broken. Luminous, the Buddha said, brightly shining. It is shining now, in this very moment, behind whatever weather today has brought, the same flame by which you have read every page of your life. There is nothing left to do tonight, and nothing left to understand. The sky is clearing. The water has settled, and the moon is in the bowl. Let the breath grow long and unhurried, the body heavy and at ease. The road has brought us all the way home, to the place we never left. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.